So, welcome to our Unit 10 Lecture 1 video on the Renaissance and Reformation, particularly the Renaissance today. Today we're going to look at exactly how the Renaissance started, who are some of the key players involved, and how it eventually would lead to this transformation out of the Middle Ages into the more modern time by going through the Renaissance first. So, before we begin, a couple different things, so pay attention.
This is Dave. He really enjoys going to the movies. He's always considerate to his fellow moviegoers. This fellow is disturbing everyone around him. Oh, look, Dave is shutting off his phone. Now is not the time for talking or texting. Oh, well, now look at that. There's a true movie-watching friend. Let's all be more like Dave.
So now that we got all that stuff out of the way, let's get talking about the Renaissance. As Europe finally starts to split up into different smaller city-states and regions, they start to become more and more stable. This is a good thing because things start going the way that they need to go. They're going up, they're getting better. We're getting out of the Dark Ages and things are becoming more stable. Some of the first countries or modern countries that we see today that are becoming more and more stable are the present countries of England, France, and Italy. All of them are evolving, all of them are becoming more stable, and this is going to help Europe get out of the Middle Ages. So because of this new support or this new security with these particular countries, we're going to see a revival of culture. People are starting to live in the same place, feel more comfortable, part of a civilization, more at home, which starts creating these new cultures and this revitalization of identity for their countries that they're staying in. Another good thing. People are returning to the cities. Trade's increasing. If we recall from the end of the Crusades, people are starting to trade with the Middle East and amongst each other again. So people are returning to the trade. Church, still important. However, it is not as powerful as it once was. Again, from the Crusades, if you recall, people were starting to lose faith in the church as a government entity, but only relying on it now more for religious and spiritual. So still a powerful part of the dynamic of everything going on, but not as powerful as it once was. Writers and artists begin to express new ideas and style. We'll talk more about these in Lecture 2, but people are starting to become more creative and inventive when it comes to doing new things outside the box, per se. We'll talk more about this as we go on. So, you might be asking yourself then, what exactly is the Renaissance? What does it mean? What is this whole thing about? Well, the Renaissance, by definition, means rebirth, particularly in the rebirth of art, writing, agriculture, architecture, learning, and culture. Okay, so all these different things are going on to make people feel more a part of their culture, doing new unique things and different things. So it's a revitalization of all these different aspects of culture. Educated people that had lived around the time were looking to bring back the grandeur of the classical Greeks and Romans. We would see, or they would go back and they would see all the different things going on throughout their culture, but they'd look behind them and see the aqueducts, or they'd see what used to be the city of Rome. All these different things they'd see, and they wanted to bring back those great days. So we see these smart people learning more about their past and wanting to bring that back. In doing so, they would create new art and new literature. The Renaissance eventually spread from northern Italy, such as cities of Florence and Venice, into other parts of Europe. Slowly it will trickle its way north eventually into those other parts of Europe. And when did this all happen? Well, The whole Renaissance started around the year 1300 and lasted to around 1600. So if you recall, the Dark Ages ended around the year 1500, and we'll see an actual overlapping period here of 1300 to 1600 where the Renaissance is just starting near the end of the Dark Ages. And it was because of the Renaissance starting that the Dark Ages would eventually end, bringing about this new idea of Renaissance, followed by this age of exploration, and finally more of a modern day time period, which we see today. So, why did this whole thing start in Italy, you might be asking yourself? Well, Italy had three distinct advantages that was in its favor. First is the city-states. Italy is breaking itself up into these smaller city-states, or these city-states that are regionally controlled, roughly the size of like southeastern Wisconsin. They're not very big, just enough to manage and supervise by one particular person or group of people. But the city-states is a good thing. It allows local government, small government. It allows these different city-states to do different things without having to worry about what else is going on. So first, city-states are able to have trading opportunities, particularly those that are next to the sea or along trade routes. With the end of the Crusades, as we talked about, there's a large increase in the number of city-states because of the large increase in the amount of trade that's going on. Because Italy was all these city-states, it was becoming more urban. Bigger cities were becoming evolving because of trade, as we've talked about. When you've got trade, you've got new cities. When you've got new cities, you've got increased trade and increased money, and economies are being grown. As compared to everybody further north of Italy, other parts of Europe, Germany, France, they're still living in the rural type atmosphere where people have not started going back to the cities yet. It will start in France, eventually, like I said, trickle its way back to the north, and we'll see more increase in the number of city-states and eventually larger countries being developed. Cities was the place where it was going on. People exchanged ideas, creating this new idea of an intellectual revolution. People, smart people, beginning to talk and learn more about what they've done, where they've been, what they've learned from around the European world that they've come from. And eventually they'll take that knowledge and spread it north and around as well. Something interesting happened though. Besides all this, if you remember, we had the plague. Well, the plague allowed for, unfortunately, the death of about 1/3 of the population of all of Europe. But what that created was a lot of job opportunities. If you've got 30% of the population that had died off, 2/3 are still there, but there's a lot of work to be done. And they didn't have enough workers to do it all. So now because of this, these survivors of the plague were able to ask for higher wages and more benefits that they've not been able to ask for before. Now the laborers can be picky and choosy about who they work for, because now they can get more of what they want, more of the things that they like, such as better working conditions or a higher pay, things along that line. Too much work, not enough workers. This helped the lower class peasants to be able to choose what they wanted to do. Because of this also led to merchants not having a lot of opportunities to expand. Their industry was crumbling because they didn't have the workers anymore. They either had to do it themselves or fall victim to the fact they didn't have anybody to help them out do their job. Because of this, a lot of these merchants would have to decide to pick up different types of ways to make money. Something that only they can do, but not staff out to other people. Some of these things that they would do is create new types of industries such as art and engineering, so that you can be contracted out for help, things like that. And things that they can do on their own that has value to some people. So here we kind of get an idea of Florence at the time particularly, or Italy with its city-states during this time period. Florence, as you can see, is on the northwest coast of the Mediterranean Sea, right kind of across from the island of Corsica. So Florence was kind of where things were going to start out. And here's who it was. So, the second reason why Italy, and Florence in particular, was the way to go for this new Renaissance thing was the merchants and the Medici. Within each city-state, there were wealthy merchants that had control over much of the trading activity that was going on in that particular city-state. Because of their wealth, they were able to have a dominating power over the politics of that area as well. And if you have that power, you're able to influence not just the trading markets, but also the leadership and the control of the policies and legal systems in that city-state. So they were using their money to help corrupt the government, as it would be. Now, most merchants did not inherit their social rank. They had to work for it. They had to use their wits and ingenuity in order to survive and keep their stronghold on power. Because of this, we see the society changing to recognize the importance of individual merit and not family history as a way to succeed in society. They had to be able to do something to make money, not just inherit it from mommy and daddy. One of these powerful merchants, or in this case it was actually a family of merchants, was a banking family known as the Medici. Throughout several generations, they would be able to generate a lot of money and a lot of power through the money that they had, which would also help lead to the Renaissance taking off. So we have a lot of the kudos going to the Medici family for what they did for the Renaissance. Let's take a look at what that looked like. First off, the first of these guys was Cosimo de' Medici. He is known as the father, the elder of the Medici family. He was the wealthiest European at the time, and was able to create this new political dynasty with his money. He was born around 1389, and later his fortune would be that of around $30 million by today's standards. So, fairly rich, especially back then, very, very rich. What was unique in the fact that he came up with this idea of creating these branch offices all throughout Europe. Doesn't sound like a big deal today, but back then there was really only all these different banks, but they were singular, they were independent of one another. Well, Cosimo came up with this idea of let's have different branches all around Europe so that no matter where the traders went, they could pull out money or deposit money or whatever they needed wherever they are in Europe. So they'd have all these branch offices all around Europe. Kind of sounds familiar if you think about a lot of the banking systems we have today. And you got Citibank, Tri-City, all these different banks that are located all around the place. This was kind of a new idea back then. Today we kind of take it for granted. His grandson, Lorenzo, would eventually become one of the great patrons of the arts, obviously during the Renaissance. He was considered probably the most smartest of all the grandkids Cosimo had. He liked to joust. He was interested in hunting and breeding horses. He was also obviously educated to take over the family business once Cosimo died, and he did that as well. There was kind of a concern about the power that this family was having, and actually a rival family at one time tried to assassinate both Lorenzo and his brother. Unfortunately, the brother died, but Lorenzo was able to get away with only suffering a stab wound. But fortunate for the rest of the world and for history, he survived because it would allow him to do what he did as far as help pay for a lot of the artwork we're going to talk about. Interestingly, you might find it, I thought it was interesting. One time, it was estimated that by the end of his life, Lorenzo's wealth had actually ended up becoming around $460 million by today's standards. And if you remember how much his grandfather was worth, this is a vast increase. So he had a lot of money and a lot of influence to get done whatever he wanted done. The thing that we recognize them most for, particularly, and we need to focus on, is both of their assistance as patrons of the arts. Patron is simply somebody who finances the arts. It can be sculpting, painting, whatever, but they basically pay somebody to do art, whether it's for personal use, for personal pleasure, or to give it out to museums or for the public. It doesn't matter. These guys helped pay for a lot of the artwork that we're going to see throughout the Renaissance. If it wasn't for these guys, we wouldn't know anything about people such as Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or Botticelli, things like those. So these guys kind of had their hand in helping with the Renaissance take off and be successful. And here we see a picture of the two of them. On the left, we see Cosimo de' Medici, and the right side, his grandson Lorenzo. Both recognized, as mentioned before, as helping start the Renaissance. So, it seems like a long time, but we still got one more thing to look at. The third reason why the Renaissance were able to start in Italy was the classical heritage of the Greeks and the Romans. The Renaissance artists looked down on the art and literature of the Middle Ages. They thought it sucked. So they wanted to come up with something new and better than what the classics had. They wanted to be as good as, if not better than, the Greeks and the Romans. So they're working to improve upon what they did. Instead of wanting to revive, they wanted to revive and increase the amount of learning of the Greeks and the Romans. They would see the ruins in the background, as I mentioned before, and they'd want to bring that back with its grandeur. Because of the Crusades, they were able to bring back a lot of manuscripts and a lot of documents that had once been lost and learn from them and figure out what happened or what they were able to do way back in the day during the heyday of the Roman Empire. Learn from them and hopefully improve upon it. As the scholars studied the manuscripts, they became increasingly more influenced by these classical ideas. The ideas such, for example, this idea of humanism, which focused on the potential and achievements of a culture and what it could become, what a person and their education could become for future generations. Today, those who study history, literature, and philosophy are said to be students of the humanities. Typically, social studies teachers or people that study social sciences tend to be those that are called humanists, or those who study the humanities. One of the things that was also different was this idea of the relation between life and your personal life and your spiritual life. Now they're starting to change their idea on how God wanted the people to live. Humanists believed that a person could enjoy life without having to offend God. Back in the Middle Ages, the idea is to focus all of your life and all of your being spiritually to God. That if you have any riches, you should be donating it to the church, to the schools, or the monks, or the convents or the monasteries. But now we got these humanists that are saying, God put me here to enjoy life. And with that, I should be able to enjoy the great things that life has to offer, such as material luxuries, good music, fine foods, nice furniture, a beautiful place to live, things like that. God wants me to be happy, and these things make me happy, so I'm pleasing God. That was kind of the idea of these humanists. So, what do we call all these people of history, culture, and philosophy and literature? Well, they're kind of humanists, but they also go by a easier term. A lot of them are known today as Renaissance men or Renaissance women. A Renaissance man is someone who strives to be a master in every area of study, such as architecture, literature, language, engineering, all this stuff. The smarter you were, the more of a Renaissance man you were. These people were expected to be charming, witty, and well-educated in the classics, as well as up on the modern stuff as well. They're also expected to be skilled riders, wrestlers, and swordsmen. which was kind of the common thing, the common activities that these people participated in for extracurricular or fun activities. On the flip side were the Renaissance women. Renaissance women were expected to be of an upper class status and should also be well versed in the classics as well as also be charming. Unfortunately, there were limitations to what Renaissance women was supposed to be also. Though they were supposed to be smart and charming, they were not expected to seek fame. They were expected to be kind of like a trophy, you could say, like a trophy wife, sort of. Smart, able to talk about things, but not get too involved in what's going on. They're supposed to inspire art, not create it, such as the Mona Lisas or the idea of Mary, the mother of Jesus. They're supposed to be inspiring, not creating these types of art. There were some women that would get involved in creating art, but it was not a common thing. Again, women were supposed to be kind of like a trophy or somebody that you look to for their beauty and their inspiration, but they weren't exactly expected to provide their opinions or anything along that lines. Additionally, they were not expected to participate in politics. They were supposed to know what was going on at the time, talk about it, but not put an opinion about it. So, kind of this whole idea of subjugating women, even through the Renaissance, was commonplace, as it was in the Middle Ages, through the time of Rome, and even up until today, where we see women still being subjugated in some respects. So women are still considered lower than man by status of the genders, or the status of the sexes. And with all that information, finally we're done. Hope you got something out of it. As normal, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm more than willing to talk to you about it and get things clarified. Our next lecture, we're going to be talking specifically about some of the sculptors and painters of the Renaissance, such as Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, the Ninja Turtles, basically we're going to talk about. So, with that, I look forward to seeing you again next time, and as always, stay awesome.